So I would love to say, as fans, we should probably just be united on this one. This is such an absurd and insane hypothesis that it's not even worth debating. We should just laugh at it. This is really, really too much. But there is something to be learned by going through the devil's advocate and looking at both sides. So we'll start off with looking at world class. Basically, what they do is very hostile takes to so-called SJW, political correctness, etc., etc., etc. Now, Jeff, who we're going to be hearing, does make a few good points, especially at the beginning, because Maggie, the writer behind this, does make a few errors. But I think the more he does his editorial, you're going to say, like, wait, okay, your basic point is fine, but then you're starting to make some critical mistakes, which shows you don't understand Halloween either. So let's hear him speak and then respond.
Halloween's bone-chilling villain Michael Myers is homophobic in new film. The long-running Halloween franchise has largely focused on the effects of Myers and his rampage on the Stroke family. The Stroke family, let's just stop right there for a second. You're so worried about homophobia that you can't even get the name of the characters right. Points off for showing your bias. And Halloween Kills is no exception to that tradition. The film is a direct sequel to 2018's Halloween, which ended with the masked killer being trapped in the protagonist Laurie Strode's burning house. Stroke family, Laurie Strode. K and D are not exactly right next to each other on the keyboard. However, fans find out in the new movie that the serial killer escaped the burning house with the help from firefighters, who he eventually killed and proceeded to go on a murderous rampage. At one point in Halloween Kills, Myers returns to his childhood home and finds an unsuspecting gay couple living there. The men, who are named Big John and Little John, realize someone is in their home and search for the intruder, but instead of making it out alive, they're murdered by Myers. The scene stirred up discussion on Twitter, with some people labeling Michael Myers as homophobic for killing the couple. Fans also drew comparison between the treatment of LGBT+ characters in Halloween Kills and the new Chucky series. So Twitter is offended. Good. That's how it should be. I'm not one to ever sing the praises of Halloween Kills, but the movie is not homophobic. It's about equality and the futility of life. Michael Myers kills indiscriminately and without remorse. I guess that raises the question about representation. Do people want representation, or do they want protection? It's something we'll dive into in just a moment, but let's talk about Big John and Little John for just a moment. In the film, they're shown to be celebrating Halloween in a traditional fashion, with Little John getting high and watching horror movies, while Big John prepares the food. Nothing shocking. The town folks don't call them any slurs. The only injustice they suffer outside of being murdered was being pranked by the kids, and they held their own pretty well. The only perceived slight against them, again outside of the murder, was the meta joke that the gay guy was dressed like a pirate and Michael Myers snuck in the back door and killed him. I don't even think that was intentional, but it was written by Danny McBride, so who knows. The most important part about all of this is the serious issue. Do people want representation or protection? Halloween Kills is treating everyone the same. It's the most sincere form of equality. What do these people on Twitter want? Do they think we're here for the Big John and Little John spin-off series? No, they want gay people in the story, but they don't want them to face any atrocities. How is that fair? They want a protected class. Do they want Michael Myers to be an ally? The dude barely functions as a human. He chows down on dogs, and oh yeah, he's the villain of the story. The bad guy. He's supposed to do bad things. Just because he's an iconic and marketable character doesn't mean he's got to be safe for the family. Disney doesn't own Michael Myers, so let's stop acting like our horror villains should be paragons of virtue, normal or the social justice variety.
Michael Myers is the bad guy. The bad guy just kills people. He killed these two people. That's the end of the story. Even though I used a very long excerpt, I'm actually trying to be nice to him because Jeff makes some minor as well as major errors. He says in a future scene that Michael kills, quote, female nurse and a male doctor who are non-white. He's got that wrong. In the film, this is kind of a twist because it's on Halloween, right? So they're wearing costumes. So she's wearing a nurse's outfit, but she's a doctor. He's wearing a doctor's outfit, but he's a nurse. See, it's a joke because they're reversing the roles. Yeah, it's not very funny in the movie either. So he's gotten that wrong in this editorial. But he is correct that this is kind of a lazy, silly article. And yes, she actually wrote stroke, not Strode, not a Halloween expert talking here. Still, is there anything to this? Well, I think overall, no. I agree. This is pretty ridiculous and insane. Now, he's saying that Michael is just evil. That's all he is. He's evil. This is pretty obvious. Well, no. I mean, John Carpenter, at least the way he usually says it, is that Michael is a force of nature. Now, force of nature, by definition, cannot really be good or evil. It's just amoral. Now, again, in some other quotes, he does compare Michael to an evil wind. I don't know how that makes sense, but there you are. So the mythology is a little bit back and forth. Is Michael even a real person, a human being, or is he supernatural? Is he beyond human? Again, the films never entirely clarify. Some go some way, some lean in on Michael being human, some lean on him being supernatural. So even his whole confident premise, well, Michael is just a bad guy. That's not the way the Halloween mythology works. It's a little bit more complex. So he didn't quite understand what Halloween is up to. But I agree with him that we can be a little bit too sensitive about some things. But it does bring up some fascinating questions about that. Michael targets people in the 2018 version, which I'm going to admit I'm very prejudiced against. I don't like it, and this is one of the reasons I don't like it. You have a scene where Michael kills a teenager. It's a slasher, it's a horror film. You shouldn't be too shocked or surprised. But the thing is, Michael doesn't really do that. And some people brought up as if this was a plot hole that, well, Michael killed a teenager, but later in the movie, he doesn't kill a child. But Michael never really killed children to begin with. In fact, in Halloween, the first film, very explicitly, we have a very well constructed scene where a kid bumps into him just by pure accident. Michael holds him, then doesn't do anything. So it's actually been a kind of consistent thing with at least some of the first films. Yeah, Michael is pretty sadistic and brutal, but he does have limits. He doesn't kill people all the time, and even some of the lesser films get this right. For instance, I know people hate Halloween Resurrections, but it actually got aspects of this correct. For instance, Michael kills a huge amount of people at the beginning, but he essentially meets this mentally disturbed kid who idolizes serial killers and knows them by heart. And Michael goes up to him, but doesn't kill him. He actually hands over his knife. And the kid narrates Michael Myers' own story as basically the film begins because it's kind of a fake out. So there's this mythology that Halloween fans have that Michael just kills, 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 destroys, destroys. And that's what Halloween Kills leans on, that Michael just ruthlessly destroys everything. No, Michael, at least in the first films, was pretty discriminating. He did usually kill people, but not all the time. That's, I think, what made him a little bit more interesting than even Jason. There is a kind of choice that Michael makes, and again, it changed depending on the mythology, right? In the first film, he's not connected to Laurie. In Halloween 2, he is. In the Thorn trilogy, he's sort of being manipulated by a cult, so on and so forth. So I'm actually agreeing with him, right? The major point is correct, that this is silly and sort of trying to look at every single victim of Michael and trying to draw this political lesson. But his other point that, listen, it's just a bad guy, it's just a silly movie. No, there is a serious mythology, there are limits, there are rules, but they're flexible and they can be altered and changed. I think the problem with these new films is they're taking the more sensationalistic side of Michael, and that's legitimate, and just focusing on that. They're not concentrating on that Michael is a little bit more than just a guy who goes on a rampage, or at least he used to be. So, again, agreement. Mostly this is silly stupidity and nonsense, and the fact that he chose these two people, kind of silly, it's irrelevant. But in terms of the more major point of how the mythology works, there is, for lack of a better word, a thoughtfulness to how Michael operated, at least in most of the films. But some of the films do just go in for the gore. They don't really pay to that aspect of the mythology. But there is more to Michael than just a guy with a knife, or at least there used to be. But I can understand how some fans are confused because there is a lot of inconsistencies within the franchise. So, agreeing, this controversy is stupid, but it does lean into more interesting questions about, well, how does Michael operate? How does the mythology operate? And so on and so forth, if you're a much more deeper fan, which I don't think Jeff is. I think he just superficially sees, yeah, Michael, Halloween, slasher, movie franchise. Yeah, mostly it is, but sometimes it does try to touch on much deeper themes. And in that case, sometimes raising these questions is perfectly legitimate. Not in this case, but sometimes.